Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our Friday night live stream. It is June 14th, 2024. We're ready to rock and roll here, both over on the YouTube channel and on TikTok. We're streaming simultaneously to both platforms. I praise the Lord we managed to hit our follower goal over on the talk to finally reach out to more individuals. So we're going to have a very fruitful discussion tonight. We got a lot to talk about in the tropics. Well, not too much. Let's be honest. We don't have too much to talk about. We're not quite there yet. We will be soon enough, though. Let's go ahead and say hello to some folks first. I'll pop out the good old YouTube chat. Take a look at everybody we have joining us tonight. I see some familiar faces as always, or some familiar names, I should say. We got Soulful Sawyer, Kayez, Freezing Zen, Richard Perez, good to see you. One Nation Weather, thanks for coming in tonight, buddy. I'm in a pretty solid mood. Excited to talk weather with everybody, even though I am a little bit on the tired side. It was a very busy day on shift at work today, on top of just heavily scrutinizing everything that there is to talk about, not only in the tropics, but across the United States for that matter as well. Let's see who else we have in the chat this evening. Nomad Avenue 6. Let's see who else do we have joining us. Did I catch everybody? If I missed you, I do apologize. Let's see. Soulful Sawyer, Kaya Zen, Richard, Freezing. Let's see who else do we have joining in the chat. Shandy Ashley, good to see you. Thank you very much for joining us. Folks over on TikTok, thank you very much for tuning into the live stream tonight. We're going to be going ahead and kicking things off. Robbie Lynn McQuarrie, thank you very much for joining us. Sharon, it's good to see you. All righty, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to go ahead and close out the big old background room, or the background window, and we'll go ahead and get started. We'll start off with a live update. So, for that matter, this is what we have on our National Hurricane Center homepage for the next 7 days. Not too sure exactly why we still have AL 90. For those of you who watched my TikTok update a little earlier today, I accidentally said AL 91. Got a little ahead of myself. I got too excited, you know. But that is AL 90. We still have him on the game board. The nice yellow X shooting off towards the northeast. Very heavily sheared low pressure area. In fact, they have dropped us down to a 10 out of 10 chance. 10% chance of organization in the 48-hour window. 10% chance in the next 7 days. And I'm truthfully surprised we're even still going with this puppy, because this thing has picked up jet support. It's got fronts, it's got heavy shear, its low center pressure is displaced, or its center of circulation is well displaced off towards the west of its main area of thunderstorm activity, looking very baroclinic in nature. So I'd imagine within the next 24 hours, hopefully, we'll see this get washed out of our charts here. And this, I'm right on board with. This is our next area of disturbed weather, area of investigation, we'll call it for now, even though it doesn't have that AL 91 designation. It probably will very soon. I actually have something very interesting to show you guys as well. I was messaging one of my buddies on X, and I'd mentioned to him, it looks like the Canadian model of all models is actually well on target. And I'll show you guys exactly why, but this is disturbance numero dos, 50% chance of cyclone formation in the next 7 days. I'll go ahead and read to you the discussion very quickly. A broad area of low pressure is forecast to form over the southwestern Gulf of Mexico late this weekend or early next week. Environmental conditions appear conducive for gradual development. Now, those are the key words, guys. Gradual development. There has been some waxing and waning in terms of whether or not we'll get a organized system far enough to the north of our Yucatan and Mexico landmasses to actually consolidate and bundle up into that textbook tropical cyclone look. Right now, every single one of our models is expecting mid-grade tropical storm intensity and organization from this feature. However, there is still that wiggling and wobbling far to the south and west, up to the north and west. So our folks out there in Texas, definitely be on the lookout for this. I do think regardless of whether or not this thing drifts off towards the south or does potentially surge a little bit further to the north, you are going to see quite an expansive increase in your overall rain and shower coverage up there for eastern and southeastern Texas, the entirety of southern Texas for that matter. I had family out in the Houston area. I have friends out there in Austin, Texas. They'll definitely feel a little bit of it. Corpus Christi, I'm just kidding, no, Corpus Christi definitely is in the threshold, in the area to where you want to be paying attention to this. Regardless of if it stays as a disturbance, Southern Florida learned their lesson, and hopefully they learned their lesson for the rest of the hurricane season. All it takes is a little bit of rainfall, a little bit of tropical energy, and next thing you know, you have flash flood conditions, and that does seem to be the primary threat with this puppy, regardless of if it really fully consolidates enough in terms of actual tropical organization. But National Hurricane Center is putting their money into it. I'm putting my money into it. I think if we have a shot at getting a named storm, it's going to be this system. We're also kind of looking, investigating, as the thumbnail implies, whether or not we're going to get another feature before our Gyre and our MJO come to a close for the month of June. I'm not sold on it. Some of our models are. We had one brief instance where the European model jumped aboard a secondary system and headed it up towards the area of southern Mississippi, the New Orleans area of Louisiana. That has since come and gone. The artificial intelligence Euro still continues to carry a twin cyclone solution. That's been very consistent. GFS pumping out the twin cyclones. The Canadian model has been very on board with twin cyclones, and believe it or not, the UK and the Korean model are actually on board with two individual low-pressure areas. So with that being said, let's get into some of the live data, shall we? We're going to look at our full disk goes east, and honestly, there's a lot of moisture out there, a ton of moisture out there, so definitely lots to look at, lots of interesting features down there. I want you guys to look closely at this right there. The reason I want you to look at that is because I personally think that with the way things are shaping up, the National Hurricane Center could have maybe gotten away with drawing our yellow blip and waiting until we do our orange blip, something like this, to tell you the truth. Because I'll show you the Canadian model here in a little bit, and that's been trending for a number of model runs on the CMC specifically, and it seems like it's spot on. It's right on the money. In fact, I got to give it its kudos. I got to give it its much-earned respect from my head of the department. It was the same deal last year. The GEPS, the Canadian ensembles, the Canadian model nailed it, Dahlia, from a distance, and it's kind of doing the same thing. And like I said, I'll show you guys. I'll support what I'm saying here in a moment. But all in all, fairly robust monsoonal trough. Gyre is in full effect. Lots of copious moisture out there. Central America is just being ravaged by heavy rainfall, consistent heavy rainfall. We saw a lot of activity in southern Florida, and we still have a little bit of that river continuing to go on over the southern half of the peninsula. I lost power very briefly earlier today as our west coast sea breeze kind of kicked in and we had some daytime development here in central Florida. But overall, if you look down there over Central America from the Yucatan through Belize, El Salvador, Guatemala, all the way down through to Colombia, we just have a ton of thunderstorm activity, lots of ample moisture for these systems to tap into, and where there's thunderstorm activity in terrain, you get that vorticity. So that's exactly what our Gyre is doing. For everybody out there a couple Mondays ago who got so upset at me for talking arrow, Gyre, arrow, if you look, bam. Then we're expecting this, bam, and you look at that moisture stream down there, bam, and you got a low pressure sitting right there, bam. So, I mean, that's all I'm going to say about that. We also, just to put it out there, there's two other individual small scale, I won't even say small scale, we'll just say very subtle whispers that I'm also keeping track of because our models are very up in the air with it. So first and foremost, this is AL90. AL90 looking very, very jet supported. You can see the polar front jet digging in across the Midwest, the Great Lakes, the Mid-Atlantic, helping to induce a little bit of cooling, hopefully before our big old ridge can really develop and broaden out across the eastern half of North America. That's really going to raise our temperatures. I've been seeing that popping off all over X, Instagram, Twitter, etc. You know what I mean. All over social media, to where we are going to be potentially under another record heat wave for a while. So definitely going to look rough, definitely going to be rough after this system can get out, but that's what's left of AL90. The reason I bring this up is as this thing takes on frontal characteristics and continues to develop support or acquire support from the polar front jet, we're going to have residual vorticity, residual frontal remnants out there across the east coast of the United States, extreme western Atlantic, between the Cape Hatteras and Bermuda area. And not only are our GFS ensembles and the Canadian ensembles trying to do something like this and cycle it back around, not too sure if it's going to be AL90 that does that. I really do think that what's going to happen is some leftover energy is going to break off as our pattern restructures itself. And some of our more reliable models actually want to get an extra little area of spinach, almost something like a tropical disturbance, a tropical wave to come back towards the Bahamas and Central Florida. On top of that, we're also examining how favorable conditions can start to get out there over the MDR. You guys see extreme right-hand side of the satellite image here. We have a lot of very good moisture activity coming across Africa. Our African easterly jet is on fuego for all intents and purposes, pumping out our robust tropical waves. ITCZ is still around the 8 to 10 degree north latitude line, keeping them primarily away from the African dust. We just haven't really had that rising motion, that upward vertical motion that we want to see. Right now, you guys can honestly see it's a telltale sign of where most of our upward vertical velocities, our atmospheric divergence is in association with the MJO. It's parked right over top. So as we sit in this current phase with the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation, out here we're still seeing a lot of sinking. If you notice, it's not just the African dust. We just have a lot of sinking air, not only all the way up towards the Azores, but all the way across the western extent of Europe, western extent of Africa, and even further to the south until you interact with that equatorial line of convergence, the ITCZ. So as this continues to migrate slowly but surely off towards the east, we've noticed a slowing trend. All this is going to go with it. With that comes a reduction in overall shear. We should probably see a little bit of a waning in our African dust, but primarily that's going to help to increase our low pressure, and I'll show you that a little bit further as well. So once again, we're going to pop over to GOES East. We're going to look at it a different AOI view, and I really want you guys, actually, no, we're just going to go right to Weather Nerds. So if you take a look right here, this looks awesome. That looks very, very low pressure-ish. Now, to tell you the truth, if I saw this last hurricane season, you guys remember we were talking about PTC 22, yada, 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 and everyone was talking about it was going to develop. Even National Hurricane Center themselves was hyping up Vince. Vince was supposed to happen. Didn't happen. If I saw this, that point in time last year, I would have definitely been a little bit more on board with saying, you know what? I do really think Vince is coming. I really do think, because that is actually an impressive area of convectively induced low pressure beginning to form up right there. And the reason I keep mentioning about this, the reason I keep bringing it up, and I'll shoot right over to the Canadian model real quick to show you guys, is the CMC is rocking and rolling. It is doing its thing. It is definitely doing its thing. I'll go over to the preset model, MSLP and preset. We'll go back to the very beginning of the run. And we'll even go back to today's Friday. Let's go back to 12Z on Wednesday. We'll go back to 12 Zulu on Wednesday, and if you look down there in the Southern Caribbean on the Canadian model, look at that. Bam. Perfect. Perfect iteration right there. Now this, pay no attention to this. I'm not too sure exactly what that was. That was one of those vorticity-induced, convectively induced low-pressure areas. That was one of our rogue features that was present on the GFS as well. But in terms of spinning up at least 1 for 2, check that out. And this is back on 12Z on Wednesday. This is valid for right now, 0Z Saturday evening, which would equate to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The Canadian model nailed that little area of vorticity down there. You switch over to the 850 more vorticity and look at all that. And that's exactly what it's been predicting is going to wander up, eventually cross the Yucatan and develop into our potential named storm. So, you know, just looking at it real time, and y'all can get mad at me. You guys can say, oh, you're freaking everybody out, nothing's happening, but there it is. I mean, it's happening. So we have something. Part of our forecast, at least one of the models, is verifying. We have our vorticity that's built in the very southernmost Caribbean. Now it's going to be an equation of whether or not it goes this way and crosses Central America or moves through Central America, because if it does, that's not going to do very well. That's not going to do very well. It's going to get ripped apart. Very mountainous terrain through here. We do have a lot of moisture and a rising motion, obviously, but these tropical low pressures in general, don't really want to go through all that frictional impact, if you will. It's going to be shredded from the bottom up. It's kind of the same prospect when you look at wind shear in relation to a thunderstorm complex. As it goes up, the wind shear chops it off, kind of like you're getting a haircut. In this case, as it goes over top mountainous terrain, it kind of acts like an underground, or not an underground, but like a subsurface cheese grater, like you're running against sandpaper, and you're going to take stuff off. And that's exactly why we don't want it to do. I mean, not that we don't want to do that, but you know, if it tracks off in this direction and crosses over, that could change the spectrum a little bit. But so far, all in all, The Canadian model is doing a fantastic job of highlighting this, so we'll definitely have to watch this as it progresses. If it goes west-northwest and moves through Costa Rica, Nicaragua, that could change things a little bit. You look at the most latest run of the Canadian model, massive tropical low pressure out there, but if you look, it's right on target for that thing to continue to lift up, kind of scrape the coastline, develop a little bit more of enhanced vorticity as it moves along the Caribbean waters, crosses the Yucatan, and then possibly develops into something. Now, the big question here is, will it try to develop early? This is the only model that's calling for that. Could this try to deepen down and we might miss it a little bit? But that's definitely a possibility. But right now, I really do think if we're going to see actual tropical genesis, or any kind of genesis for that matter, organization, consolidation, it's going to happen in the Bay of Campeche. And then from there, we're going to go back and forth just a little bit. I do want to emphasize that Southern Texas should definitely be watching this first entity. Regardless of if it develops, and that's one of the big things we want to emphasize, it doesn't need to be tropical for X, Y, and Z to occur. You're right, absolutely. And in this case, as we all very well learned with Southern Florida and the event that we just went through, and even for my guys out there in the Cayman Islands, I've gotten some messages out there. Don't think that we've been ignoring you. I've been mentioning Cayman Islands during previous updates as well. Cayman Islands, Cuba, all of our little individual island nations out there need to be paying attention to this as well. This is a lot of rainfall for a consistent and steady period of time until that gyre can get up out of there. Regardless of if we have a tropical feature or a yellow-orange blip, it is still raining. So that's one of the key takeaways here. Development is only really applicable for our folks in southernmost Texas. I'm talking getting close to the Mexico border. Might try to make a little bit more of a run to the north, but we have about 5 more days before we really nail down what is going to take place. So there's a lot of wiggle room, a lot of lead time to get ahead of it. Right now, the rain threat, the flood threat, and maybe the rip current threat along the coastline is going to be an issue. Blessed_Mama X5 over on TikTok. Thank you very much for tuning in and asking a good question. No Florida right now. Florida is okay. We're going to have to continue to monitor for our daytime thunderstorm threat, especially for southern Florida. A lot of that water, because of how humid it is out here, especially with increased cloud cover coming up from the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico, it's going to take a while for that water to go down. And that also is very, very deadly for our folks down there and across the state for that matter, because as we all know, Florida, especially for our swamplands, is synonymous with mosquitoes. And I remember back in the day when I was growing up, anytime we had tropical features coming through, we had a lot of standing water, West Nile, and other diseases and viruses that they may be traveling with become a lot more communicable as the water sits, it marinates, and that's also an issue that I would say a lot of folks who are tuning in need to be paying attention to, whether you're in Florida or even in Texas, Louisiana, anywhere in those more humid, moist environments. Down there in the Caribbean, the bug threat, the insect threat is going to be kind of going up. You don't want to interact or mess around with any standing water. It's kind of disgusting. So yeah, definitely kind of stay away from that. Let's get back to it. So we'll head on over to our probabilities. So the probabilities have been very steadfast. You can see it's actually, you know what? Hey, I'm kind of dumb. I just noticed this. As a matter of fact, if you look at our European model probabilities, we have tropical depression probabilities flaring up from that low pressure that's present on the chart right now, and then extra area down here. So perhaps it's going to be a conglomeration of vorticity and juice, as Mike's weather page would say, conjoining together and developing into something in the Bay of Campeche. Then it's just a matter of if it goes on a crash course towards the X coast, the east coast of Mexico, or tries to drift a little bit further to the north. We still have both solutions in mind. Definitely still have both solutions in mind. And we'll have to take a look as we get closer in time. 96-hour mark, you can see these areas are on a collision course, and they collide more or less just off the Yucatan coastline before our probability surge all the way up to that 90 percentile. So, and this has been fairly consistent for a while now. Very consistent for a while now. And if you look out there over the MDR, we're starting to get a little bit of signaling that some of these waves are going to try to act up and do a little something more. So all in all, this is going to be our hotspot right there. Western Caribbean, not Western Caribbean. Well, I mean, yes, Western Caribbean, but mainly the west and southern portions of the Gulf of Mexico. And then we'll have to maintain vigilance and determine whether or not we'll have the ingredients or the vorticity available for things to come up out of the Gulf and head towards the Gulf coastline. That's been echoed consistently on a number of different models, and I'll show them to you here in a moment. What's going on in the chat? Because I see discussion and debates. I've been in this stream for half a month, but I think I've established myself as more trustworthy than Naz. That's like almost a direct insult, to tell you the truth. I just don't understand why anyone would want to consume the content when there are plenty more level-headed folks out there to watch. Not too sure what I'm not exuding in terms of level-headed. Haven't said anything that would be considered blasphemy. So please enlighten us. In fact, I'll go back through the chat and see. He was calling for a tropical storm in the first few weeks of June. Raised, you do realize it is June 14th, right? We're not in July. We're not in August. For the first couple of weeks of June, and if you guys want to fact check me, I feel like this is a political channel to an extent. If you guys want to fact check me and determine if it's misinformation or not, you can refer all the way back to late May and check. Even in my posts on TikTok, on Instagram, on X, I mentioned from June 10th to about the June 21st time frame. For my faithful viewers out there, you guys will know exactly what I'm talking about. But from June 10th to June 21st, I had mentioned a numerous amount of times that if we're going to get some tropical action, it's going to be within that time frame. But I guess I'm out to lunch. I guess I'm not level-headed. Perhaps I'm not level-headed. That was a very, very ridiculous assumption of me to make. We have a developing disturbance out there right in between those date lines, but I guess I don't make any sense. Now, let's talk about August. So if you look at the EPS cyclones, I only have this AOI pulled up because we can see a little bit closer. I definitely like to use the actual spaghetti plots a little bit more, and I guess we could go over to, yeah, we'll do that. Let's go over to Weather Nerd so I can pull it up a little bit closer and I can zoom in for you guys. I don't want to use that other wonky-looking chart overlay because it doesn't quite do the job, so let's zoom in down here, update the plot. Shout out to weathernerds.org, by the way. I love the user interface. It's pretty solid. You can zoom in and take a look at all sorts of different things. So these are going to be the ECMWF ensembles or the EPS ensembles, and we'll just go ahead and go out to 96 hours and update. So as you can see, wow, actually look at that. Yeah, so the EPS ensembles are doing a fantastic job, as a matter of fact, right now as well, highlighting that feature that's down there in the Southern Caribbean. So we actually have some pretty decent agreement from our 12Z European ensembles that low pressure that we identified, this bad boy right in through here, that's what the European ensembles are picking up on that could possibly try to maintain organization as it rides the coastline of the eastern shores of Central America before it arrives in the Bay of Campeche and tries to do something. I think because it's going to be hugging the coastline, we probably won't get very much development out of it. Either that, or if we do, then, the National Hurricane Center is already busted, but I'm pretty sure they're seeing the same thing we are. Then what's very interesting is you have another area of vorticity, another area of low-pressure members that also come up into the BOC. So this is very tricky. This is why, for everybody who was coming after me, for everybody who was pissed and wanted to string me up by my britches, for lack of better terms, for that one thumbnail a couple of Mondays ago while I was in North Carolina, this is exactly why I drew the thumbnail the way I did, because we're going to have all sorts of individual pieces of energy, vorticity, moisture, spin in the atmosphere, moving around in different ways. And as you can see, the European ensembles, you can't argue with that, are showing that we have energy down here that's going to try to transition up as our ridge builds in over the Atlantic, and we have another piece of vorticity that's going to wander up out of the Eastern Pacific and kind of tap that out. That's why we still haven't had any execution in the East Pac. East Pac has been dead, and we are now at that full month mark of being in their hurricane season. So who's to say when we'll actually get a named storm? I was convinced that Aletta was going to happen, but there's something really, it could be the transition between Enzos, it could be the negative PDO, that bleeding over effect of the subsidence created by that cool pool, but yeah, we're definitely, the North Atlantic, or I should say the Tropical Atlantic Basin, is really pulling in any piece of energy that might try to develop down there in the East Pac, and we haven't even exploited it yet. We haven't taken full advantage of it just yet. If we go out to 144 hours, we'll go out to 5 days and update the chart. You can see that there is a huge area of window. Shit, well, okay, all right, Zuriel, whoever, if I have a moderator in here, we got to kick this person out. I'm not going to tolerate that. I'm glad I looked up at the right time. Zuriel, we got to boot him. We got to do something, because I'm definitely not going to tolerate that. You don't tell somebody else to shut up. That is extremely uncalled for, and I'm not going to stand for that. So please, TRG, thank you very much for tuning in tonight as well. Shout out to you, buddy. Thanks for stopping by. We got to get him out of the chat, or we got to mute him or something like that, because I'm not going to take that. I actually really appreciate Sharon's joining us all the time. She's been a very frequent recurring viewer, and I'm not going to take that. You do not tell somebody else to flagrantly shut up. That's not, nope, not going to fly. So anyways, as you can see, we have quite an expansive margin of error here. Some of them don't really want it to develop, and that's been kind of back and forth as well. Some of our models, even the earlier iterations of the GFS, actually have this thing hugging the coastline so much so that it really has no chance to manifest itself into a tropical cyclone. So that's why a couple of days ago I mentioned I'm about 50% of the way there towards development. Hurricane Center right there is at 50%, so we're right on the money together. We're singing in unison. We're on the same tune, dialed in, however you want to put it out. And that's going to be the kicker. If this thing stays too far to the south because it's too weak of a feature to be drawn towards the north, it's not going to be able to execute development. If it comes a little further to the north, notice that the more north you go, you get a little bit of stronger members out there as well, deepening it down into an organized tropical storm. That's going to be another kicker. We're playing the timing game, and you know, truthfully, I'm not a big fan of this. With as much excitement that has surrounded this hurricane season, with as many official sources out there, even NOAA themselves calling for an extraordinary hurricane season, I thought we wouldn't be sitting here biting our nails like, is it gonna form? Is it gonna form? You know, like, come on. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. Obviously, weather's gonna do what weather wants to do. So all in all, this is where our margin of error sits. So we have a pretty big margin of error, but the general thinking does seem like we're going to see a Mexico landfall or whatever the heck this thing decides to do. A couple of Ensemble members still picking up on some weak disturbance out there just to the east of the Bahamas, east of Florida. That's the other piece I was talking about. And if I were to zoom back out to the entire AOY, that's not what I wanted. Let's go out to the North Atlantic. And if I go all the way to the end of the 12Z European loop, you'll start to see that we are getting very, very small whispers that there are some waves out there that might... What the heck is that? Sorry, I got distracted. That was like the dog from Up. Squirrel, what is this? I don't know what that is. But anyways, we're starting to get very, very small signals that our MDR might try to wake up as we get towards the very tail end of June. That is when that MJO is going to move through, and we're going to finally see a bit of a weakening trend in our overall wind shear out there. The dust may be a little hit or miss. We're obviously going to have plume followed by moisture, plume followed by moisture. It's not going to be a steady stream. So again, we're kind of setting the chessboard in place to whether or not an African easterly wave or a tropical wave will be given the tools to its tool belt to stay robust, stay put together more or less without ingesting too much of that dry, dusty air and make a push towards the Lesser Antilles. Here we go, looking at the GEFS ensembles. GFS ensembles actually do a very good job of highlighting that feature down there in the Southern Caribbean. So actually all of our ensembles and some of the actual model suites, the operational models, are doing a pretty decent job in terms of depicting that southern coastal energy. So if we look down here in the Southern Caribbean, this is going to get pulled up towards the BOC. This also area is expected to cross over and collide with that energy in the BOC. Problem is, if you look at our 12Z GFS members, notice that a large majority of them really do hug the coastline. They really do. They just glides west-northwest through the Bay of Campeche right into Mexico. Far few in between members actually want to take it up towards Texas, let alone Louisiana. And then, honestly, what's very interesting, I don't know if I'm sold on this. I keep going back and forth in some of the other chats I'm a part of off the YouTube, off the TikTok. But you see that secondary wave of ensemble members right there showing a stronger system coming up out of the Yucatan or out of the Yucatan Channel and then headed towards the north. The reason I'm not sold on this is we really don't have a ton of convergence. If you look at our ensemble members here, they're very spread out between Mobile, Alabama, Pensacola, all the way back towards the Houston, Corpus Christi area. And so if you come over to our actual GFS and take a look down there in the Caribbean, this is the 18Z. I know I'm using the happy hour run, but you know, at the same time, all of it looks about the same. If I go back to 12Z, it's not going to make much of a difference. You see our first system form up, stays very broad, very elongated, and the operational model really doesn't give it too long to marinate over open water and develop something. And then comes that secondary system right there. Looks very heavily biased thanks to the thunderstorm activity and the moisture that's present in the Caribbean, the Western Caribbean. So I don't know. That's the big question mark right there, because the Canadian model has it too. The Canadian model has it too, and the European model hopped aboard that train for one, if not maybe two individual model runs. The European Artificial Intelligence model has it on there. You can see it right there. That's the same storm, just further off to the west. In fact, the European AI model has two very different solutions. That first one, it actually wants it to go right into southern Texas, believe it or not. And then that secondary system that comes out of the Yucatan is much weaker, much more broad, and takes the path very similar to what our European ensembles are thinking. So we're kind of back and forth, or I should say we're upside down, more or less. The European model and its ensembles want that first system to stay weak, broad, crash into Mexico, and then a potential for a second one that may try to do something. Blessed_Mama X5, I'll be in West Central Florida. Do I need to cancel my vacation? No, not at all, Blessed. I'm sorry I missed your comment for a little while there. No, definitely don't have to cancel your vacation. West Central Florida is sitting pretty right now. You'll just have to deal with our day-to-day sea breeze. That's all. Just our typical garden variety thunderstorms we typically see here in Central Florida. Let's see. Will Southeast Texas get hit? So Southeast Texas, Jessica, is definitely going to see an increase in rainfall. Regardless of where that puppy goes, we're definitely going to see a large increase in our rainfall. I'll take you through the 12Z European model just so you can get a feel for it. You can see really good agreement. It's been very consistent that a very broad area of low pressure is going to come up out of the Yucatan, BOC, and develop. But the key takeaway here is, and I know Mark Suddeth had mentioned earlier on his page as well, fully on board with what he was saying. If you look at the pressure gradient and the cyclonic rotation around this low, regardless of what happens, you're going to have lots of rainfall coming in towards southeast and all of southern Texas for that matter. If we move on over to the southern plains really quick, I'll zoom us in like I did on my TikTok update earlier today. You come down here and you switch over to the preset model. Even if I do just the 24-hour preset to show you guys what the swaths of rainfall will look like, you can see that rain wave after rain wave is going to occur, and you get a nice region of very heavy rainfall that's going to come through within a 24-hour window. The coastline, the immediate coast, could see between 2.5 to 3.5 inches of rain, some isolated bouts of 4 inches. Interior Texas within 24 hours. According to the Euro anyways, this is definitely going to move around a little bit. Looking at a general average about 1 to maybe just under 3 inches. 1 and 2 3/4, we'll say. We'll see. Saw something earlier that had been something that's popped up with the... Oh, I missed it. Let me go up and see. Saw something earlier that had a system coming into the Pensacola area toward the end of the month. Yeah, so the European Artificial Intelligence model has been kind of picking up on that as well. It's been extremely wishy-washy. So... I'm not hard... The number one feature that I'm more and more becoming a little more sold on is going to be our first Bay of Campeche system. After that, we're still very up in the air. We're more or less back into speculation or fantasy land, but the evidence is there, so it's definitely worth investigating. It's not like we're looking at a rogue happy hour run of the GFS. So... the Gulf coastline, period, wherever you reside, whether it be western Florida all the way down to southern Texas, should be watching. And I don't know if we have anyone watching from Mexico or the Yucatan, but you guys should definitely be paying close attention as well, because it's going to be coming at you right from the jump start, whatever it is that decides to form itself up. Let's see. Well, obviously, oh my God, I swear, everybody's a critic, yo. Everybody's a critic. By the way, TG Herman and iWall Addict, thank you very much for the generous donations. I do appreciate it, guys. That means so much. I never ask for the donations, but, it goes without saying, the generosity really, really helps to fuel the channel, and it helps to fuel the intensity I put into these live streams, I'm not going to lie. Out of curiosity, what's your opinion of the AI Euro so far as a meteorologist? To tell you the truth, it has its credibility. I believe it was a few updates ago, I think here on the channel, if not internally with one of the sidebar conversations I had. We really didn't get a full bona fide circulation or really robust area of low pressure, but the European Artificial Intelligence model did nail what happened in Florida from, I believe, a 6-day period of lead time. It was on there consistently run to run for about 6.5 days in advance. Obviously, there were different iterations of whether or not it was going to consolidate, if it was going to be a low pressure, if it was going to be just an area of rainfall. But even going back further than that, I believe sometime towards the back end of my North Carolina shenanigans, I remember pointing out to somebody on X that the Euro AI had a large swath of rainfall coming in. So, I mean, so far we haven't seen too many rogue storms or too many phantom storms a la the GFS on the AI European model. So it's definitely got its kinks, obviously, but you know, it's not something that's completely just ruined or anything like that. It's not something that you can just turn off and turn away from. In fact, you know, the European AI model is pretty on track, if I'm not mistaken, with what the regular Euro has. Yeah, if you look at that, in terms of run-to-run and overlap consistency, that convergence that we always talk about, if you look, we're pretty on target. This is a 12Z Euro AI, and then this is the 12Z European IFS, so the actual operational model. Right on cue. Might be stamping the low a little bit further to the southeast because we have such a broad area of circulation right there, but I mean, all in all, it seems to be doing its thing. It's not like we have the actual European model stamping a low there, and then the AI model is all the way out here in the Gulf of Mexico. So we do have that decent convergence. We do have that model agreement, whether it be artificial intelligence or operational, with our ensembles peppered in there as well. So, you know, to answer your question, Eyewall Addict, I'd say it's definitely a model I like to look at just to get a quick reference. The one thing I do not like about it, though, is the smoothing. I really don't like the smoothing here. It's too clean. It's way too clean. The resolution is way too low. It's too smoothed out. So you really don't get a very, very good generalized takeaway for anything larger, I should say smaller than the mesoscale. If we're looking at overall states and countries, geographic regions, then yeah, no, absolutely, use it to forecast. But I would definitely use this AI artificial intelligence model to give you a generalized synoptic scale overview and then dig in and kind of narrow that down a little bit using other more refined models to get away from that smoothing issue, because I really don't like the smoothing. Not a fan of the smoothing even on radar. I think smoothing just kind of deletes or kind of detracts from the features you're really scrutinizing on, even radar for that matter. So before we go any further talking about that feature in the BOC, I just wanted to show you guys a couple other things. So we'll randomly just take a look at the Korean model, because the Korean model, surprisingly, even though it's not a model platform that's utilized by a number of other forecasters out there, I like to have as much evidence to put out on the table before announcing things like a storm or anything like that. And if you look at the KMA model, nailing it. Look at that down there. 12 Zulu model, a couple hours ago. If you look down there, there's a low pressure spin down there in the Southern Caribbean, so doing fairly well. Kind of keeps it hugging the coastline. You can track that area through, a large area of low pressure with that stuff that's wandering up from the East Pac, and then right around that same time, blam. So perfect. We're in sync. Definitely doing its thing. So the Korean model is on board. It's not out to lunch or doing anything bizarre either. Tracks it right up in towards the northern Mexico coastline, bringing it a little bit closer to southern Texas. So we'll definitely have to wait and see what happens there. The Korean model does have a second storm right there forming up, kind of like what the AI Euro has going on. Very elongated, very broad, very sheared, it looks like. I think this is probably beyond the point where our MJO is really helping to provide us with any kind of additional upper level support. If you look at the timestamp, this is 24 June, so we're outside of that window of opportunity we've been discussing for quite a while now. But it's worth noting that it is there. It's definitely on the board. This is another model platform that does have it on the board. And then if we come over to our UK model, the UK Met is a fairly reliable model for sure. I know that Scrooge McDuck, I'm not sure if he's in the chat tonight, he loves to use this model, and I do agree with him. The UK Met model on board with that same kind of general area of development right there. Getting a nice little weak closed low. Looks like the mid-level trades or the mid-level winds coming out of the Caribbean might play a role in whether or not it can fully wrap around. But definitely worth noting that our UK model is also in agreement that we're going to get something fairly robust that closes off. And then if you look, this is what I'd mentioned earlier. No one's really paying attention to it. No one's mentioning it, but this has been on the UK, on the Euro, on the Icon, on several different model runs. And if you look, the UK Met is also identifying some kind of weak, weird leftover vorticity that tries to bundle up as it moves in towards either the Jacksonville, Georgia area, or I don't know, something's there in the pattern. It's leftover breakaway energy from the vorticity associated with that front that's attached to AL90 right now. And so, I don't know. Very interesting to watch. We'll have to see as we get closer towards the 20s of June, towards I want to say middle parts of next week. Am I out to lunch on that? Am I calculating correctly? Yeah. So sometime around Tuesday, if not Wednesday of next week, we'll have to take a look out there in the subtropics and see if there's something that does spin back around and try to do something. Not really expecting much out of it. If you come on over, for example, to the icon model at 12 Zulu so we can see far enough out in time, you look at the icon at 12Z, and you can also see that little weak perturbation out there. It kind of spins around, and right there tries to do something, makes a run towards South Carolina as more of an open wave with a little bit of cyclonic curvature to it. But just very interesting to note. Just a little fun tidbit, I guess you could say. Yeah, there were some ensemble probabilities that did have that bullseye for possible development on our European model, but that has since weaned itself off. If you come back to the tropical depression probs and take a look at the Caribbean, I believe it was yesterday at 12Z. You look right there. You can see some gray blobs popping up over the Bahamas, over Florida. I believe it was at 0Z as well. Had a bit more of a pronounced signature. There you go, right there on the 23 June. Headed into the following weekend, not this weekend, but next weekend, you could see a little bit of probability spinning up out there. So the Euro was kind of taking a whiff and then fell off. So we'll have to see. We had a couple runs of the European model that did have it on there, but it dropped it. It has dropped it for the remainder of its most recent model runs. And then finally, last but not least, we're going to take a bit of a glance at the long-range picture, because as that MJO propagates through, if you guys look, we don't have too much in the way of extreme conditions out there to prevent these waves from staying somewhat consolidated, staying somewhat organized and amplified. If you look, that Tut low is going to go, not that Tut low, but that upper tropospheric trough right in through here, that is a really great suppressor for tropical activity, according to the European ensembles, is going to eventually go away as we get into late June, and we're going to replace it with some very good anticyclonic flow, a little bit of a call neutral point just to the west of the Cabo Verdes, but all that area is going to look a little bit more favorable for tropical activity, so we'll need to see exactly what happens towards the very tail end of the month. If you look, the European ensemble is still thinking we're going to have a very good anticyclone out there over the Gulf and the Caribbean, which is going to help to keep our shear predominantly to the north. This is what our shear pattern should look like if this manifests itself. I'll go ahead and highlight it this way. This is where a lot of your shear is going to likely present itself. Maybe a little bit of bleed over, obviously because it's wind shear, it's winds in the atmosphere. We're not going to have that perfect, symmetrical line, that fine line. But yeah, MDR could try to pop out a la Tropical Storm Brett or a Cindy from last year. And then the big question would be if we do, I gotta spell it out, if, W-E, we, D-O, do, G-E-T, get, if we do, if we do get any kind of a wave that wanders through and manages to hold together, then what'll be the real kicker is whether or not it comes into the Caribbean and dies, or if it can keep going. Because last year, if you remember, we had Brett and Cindy that came in, and then unfortunately they died instantly because of all that subsidence, all that sinking air, all that extreme wind shear from El Nino. Which, by the way, as a matter of fact, I saw a couple of you guys in the chat earlier mentioned, yes, the CPC has officially ended El Nino. I know by the temperatures and the SOI, the index out there, we've been out of El Nino for a little while now, but they have officially, per the textbook, closed that chapter. We are in a neutral pattern, and they're forecasting that La Nina will start to pop off, at least start to deepen down as we roll through July. I'm still waiting on La Nina. I'm not sold on La Nina. Do I think we have the chances of running into a weakened La Nina? Yeah, no, definitely. Definitely. That's what a lot of our Climo models have been predicting, but we have technically already busted the La Nina forecast, because if you hearken back to our earlier live streams, everybody had mentioned what was going on with La Nina. There were talks of super La Nina. There were talks of What else? A historic La Nina. All the stuff that Raised is accusing me of doing. There were a lot of other sources out there talking about La Nina, exploding La Nina this, and extreme La Nina that. Every kind of adjective you want to put on the table by June and into July, and we're not there. We're not there, and that really has me kind of like, okay, what's going on out there? Because if you look, even right now, as a matter of fact, we've had another little wave come through, and we're warming again. So we're as neutral as we can possibly get. We've been neutral since the middle portions, the second, third week of May, and now we're approaching the back end of June, and we're still perfectly neutral. Perfectly neutral. So, I don't know. And Raised, absolutely right. In fact, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot, buddy, because there are a lot of times where I've mentioned on this channel, as a matter of fact, TRG and One Nation Weather and a lot of my other followers can testify to this. A lot of the big things I emphasize is pattern recognition. Pattern recognition is an excellent tool, and if you want to come for me and say I'm not using pattern recognition, take it up with some of my old previous mentors at the 25th Operational Weather Squadron, because they're the ones who taught me pattern recognition. So, good one. Anyways, yeah, so it's very interesting that La Nina is not coming in just yet, and all of our Climo models have, in fact, busted on this. They have, and there's no arguing that. The climate models were wrong, and I'm not afraid to admit that. I know that that definitely raises the question of if they're correct in their interpretations of all this moisture and prevailing wind flow that we're going to see out there in the tropics. That's neither here nor there. That's something we're going to have to verify as we go day by day now, because we're in that window. But in terms of looking at where we are in comparison to, say, the likes of January, February, and March, we have busted. The forecast is wrong. And, I mean, we can pull it up and do our usual fact-checking on here. Let's go to the CanSIPs. This is the one that everybody has been emphasizing. The CanSIPs is the one that everybody has been mentioning and really, really hyping up. So if you go back to February, you can see that by June, we were supposed to be into a weak La Nina. These variables out here, right in the Enzo 4 and negative, or not negative, excuse me, in the 4 and 3-4 region are down into that negative 1.2, negative 1.5, and then in July, right there, we have that moderate La Nina already going on. If we come up to now, notice that our La Nina is not there yet. The models are kind of backpedaling on themselves. This would be kind of like a weak La Nina, and obviously these are SST anomalies, so they're only going to give us a fraction of the picture, because obviously you want actual temperatures, you want actual observational readings to determine what the temperature is, then you can compare it and generate whatever kind of anomaly is in, comparison to the historical averages. But regardless, if you look at the difference between March, boom, vast difference between then and now. Much weaker iteration. Same thing with the NMME. If you look back in time and go back to February, boom, La Nina plastered across the screen. You go to June, now much weaker iteration. So I can definitely say our Climo models are not doing very well with the Enzo. And no, Samuel Reed, definitely not saying the hurricane season is going to be a dud. I think since we are in a neutral pattern, which, if I'm not mistaken, I almost want to say, and I'm not going to try to shoot blanks here and tell you when, I almost want to say at one point last year, whether it be in September or October, we did a discussion on the channel, and I'd mentioned it would be very, very interesting to see what the pattern would look like and what our systems would do if we were under neutral conditions. So maybe we jinxed it. But anyways, the models are backing off on their La Nina depiction. The CFS still thinks we're going to drop down into a strong La Nina, but we're not there yet. We've busted. We've already messed up. And the SST anomalies are something that we can definitely verify at this point in time, because we have model data from the start of the year leading up to now. So we have verified the models, and they're wrong. Now the question is, how wrong are we going to be in terms of this stuff, the precip that everyone's been freaking out about? Because they really haven't adjusted their take at all. The most that they've adjusted is the depiction of where that moisture is going to go in relation to maybe what the Enzo is shaping up to be. It looks like our greatest column of moisture now is right in through here. I don't know why my pen is that big now. Whereas initially, during the earlier months of this year, it was kind of more like this. It was looking very 2005-esque. Lots of Gulf juice, lots of Caribbean juice, Southeast, Mid-Atlantic maybe, but now we're looking at the Eastern Seaboard and Florida, the Greater Antilles, being a target for a lot of the precip. So, you know, now we're in a holding pattern. We'll definitely have to see exactly what happens. Let's see if our model's busted on the precip depictions for June. No, it actually doesn't look like it. So the NMME is doing fairly good in its overall depiction of our June moisture from all the way back in March. Even February doing an outstanding job. Let's go to the CanSIP, so let's do a little verification on that. So the CanSIPs back in February thought that, okay, so yeah, models aren't doing too bad. Models aren't doing too bad. So if you look, we have decent African easterly jet, African easterly waves or tropical waves, lots of robust moisture in the Caribbean, Central America. So, and this is the February 1st, my birthday. February 1st CanSIPs, you go to March. And yeah, so June, the precip is doing okay. The precip models are doing okay. Are there patterns that we can check to see where it might be headed aside from the graph, or is this something that just happens in nature? There is, and I want to figure out if I can pull it up. Let's see. I've seen it thrown around so many different times. Let's see. I'm going to probably mess this up. I need to find our, let's see, is this it? Probably not. Nope, that's not it. There is a chart to where you can not forecast, but you can see the Ensemble output for what the trade winds are going to look like. And I believe someone had shared earlier today, yeah, very quick, I apologize. I'm going to put the stream on hold so I can pull it up for you guys and take a look at it. But somebody had just shared in the tropical chat that I'm a part of that trades are really going to come in and La Nina should be on track for really showing herself as we get into July. Let me see. I know it's in here. I just saw it posted not too long ago. Was it today or was it yesterday? And that's not it. Almost it. That's not it. Almost there. If I don't find it in the next 10 seconds, I'm just going to go back to the chat. Let's see. Maybe it was a little further back. There's that. There's that. There's this. Nope, there's not that. That's not it. Those are ensembles. Gosh, I forget. I'm getting dizzy scrolling as fast as I am through this chat. So much conversation going on throughout the day. Come on, where is it? Is this it? That's not it. That's the African standing wave. That's another thing too, guys, that I want to bring up as a matter of fact now that I came across it. Here it is. So it's the 850 zonal wind anomaly on weathermodels.com. Let's see if we can find it. Zonal wind anomaly. Let's see. GFS, zonal wind anomaly. I might have to control F. Zonal, nope, that's not it. Maybe it's in the model specialty. Go back to the main page of weather models. Go to the model lab, the special charts, and let's take a look at our cyclone. Do we want the cyclone maps? No, we don't. Do we want this? Let's see. Are we going to be able to pull this up? Probably not. Anyways, though, now that we're on here, for example, the GEFS, the control member for the equatorial region in terms of our velocity potential, you can see that right now we are in that favorable environment, that rising air associated with the MJO, right over top the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico until maybe about June 24th. Then that transitions to the MDR. I'm pretty sure that the European model, the vorticity anomaly on the there goes my aneurysm. Yeah, so as you can see, that anomaly is going to transition out to the MDR, and we'll have a favorable condition setting up until just before July 1st. So we'll definitely have to wait and see. I guess we could technically come over here to the GFS on here and take a look at our, I think that's way too big. I don't think that's going to work. Yeah, so we can't really see it on here. I want to find that chart. Where is it? Global 15 days. That's not what I want. Let's see. Where's the GFS? Global cyclones, 10-day probability, 10-day, 16-day. Can I click on something different on here? Let's see. 850. Aha! We found it. Here we go. All right. So if you look, for the time being, this model run is not doing us the greatest. This doesn't really, I'm not sure. I don't really buy into this. That shows El Nino returning from the 19th of June to the 23rd, but this is essentially your zonal wind anomalies, and what this is showing us is when we're going to have stronger trades coming across the Pacific or more of a backwards flow effect like we see with El Nino. The reds would be more of a westerly, the greens or the blues would definitely be more easterly, just to give you a bit of a breakdown on this. So wherever you see the blues is technically where you're probably going to get upwelling, you're going to have those colder temps come up to the surface of the ocean. This doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense. I don't know why the GFS is showing that here. What about the control member? That's not going to do it. All right, anyways, let's see. We'll go down to this one. Kind of the same thing. Oh, well. Anyways, that's more or less what you'd want to use to determine if your El Nino, La Nina, etc. is going to be going on. But I have noticed on that potential disturbance after the first BOC disturbance is moving up in time, so this is something to keep our eyes on just because the Ensemble show it also. Jose, I definitely agree. Ice cream and hype. That's... I'm not even going to say anything. That just seems really... Okay, anyways. But yeah, guys, so that's just about it. You know, we're still going to have to keep an eye out. I'm really thinking that the Bay of Campeche is going to be the one to execute it for us. And if it doesn't, then I'm giving up. If it doesn't do anything, then, well, I guess we are riding out the 2004 hurricane season all over again, because we're probably not going to get very much in July. If I go back to that vorticity anomaly chart, if we're looking to, as Raised in the chat wants to say, if we're looking to hype things up, if you are out there and you have a YouTube channel, you have social media, and you want to talk hurricanes and, oh shoot, hurricane season, Cat 5s, etc., this does not look very good. That does not look good. We're in for a very, very, very boring July. Very boring July. All I'm going to say, Raised, is you're going back to a Mike Tyson quote. Social media has made a lot of folks way too comfortable with talking smack and not getting punched in the face for it. That's all I'm going to say. Because I'm reading between the lines, and that is a direct insult towards the information that I'm putting out. And you know what? That's cool. That's cool. Definitely cool. It's very easy to speak up and talk when there's a camera and there's X amount of miles between people. That's all I'm going to say. But yeah, guys, I'm looking at what July has in store, and it looks very boring. It definitely looks very boring. We don't really have very much going on out there. We have this small window in time to where our MJO, everything is coming into alignment, which is why I definitely believe that if we don't get any sort of tropical action, then we're going to be shut down for a while, because that is an extreme positive anomaly, which means we're going to have really intense forcing in the upper levels through the Atlantic Basin to its entirety. And honestly, it does not look like the Eastern Pacific is going to turn on very much. We had a small window here in the Pacific to where we could see some favorability out there in the East Pac down to the south of Baja California, but at least in terms of general overhead forcing to really get things going, it just does not look very favorable. On here, this kind of shows that we could still get some circulations out there. What this is showing, more or less, guys, is a horizontally, turned sideways perspective of where we could have our lowest pressures traveling. It's very weird. You got to think about it three-dimensionally, and in terms of its chronology, I think that's a word, chronological time step, or how it advances in time, it goes this way. And so everywhere you see these little blips, these dashed areas, or the lines of blue, green, teal, however you want to call it, it's showing possible low pressure development and low pressure activity out there, but I really don't know. I don't know. We definitely have to wait and see. That is a massive, wow, massive ensemble member that goes into Texas there. Huge area of low pressure there. Geez, nothing on that model run. There's something out there in the MDR. Low pressure, a little bit of action out there, low pressure, a little bit of action out there. Nice little Greater Antilles impact right there, headed up towards the mid-Atlantic coast. And right now we're looking at our individual model members from this here. This would be the broken down version of that, looking at ensemble member after ensemble member. And, you know, there's really, it looks fairly uneventful. Oh, I didn't even realize I had an animal in here. Did not even realize I had an animal in here, but Meatmo is here. What are you doing in here? Heard a noise. I'm like, what the heck? Absolutely. Absolutely. August, September, October will probably be extremely active. Yeah, weather at this point, that's funny, weather. At this point, if we don't get any action at the first start of the hurricane season, then I really do think it's going to be very backloaded. It's going to probably be very 04-esque. And 04, I know I keep bringing it up, and I'm not here trying to say that we're going to have 5 or 6 named storms for the state of Florida, but in terms of its general activity, you know, 04 was very backloaded. Definitely. 04 was extremely backloaded, and it was definitely a season where we had just come down from an El Nino into a neutral pattern, so things got started very slowly. And history does repeat itself, not in terms of the landfalls or the impacts, but in terms of just the overall cyclic nature of the atmosphere. I wouldn't be surprised if we got a very, very, very slow start. There are a lot of folks who are trying to cancel the season now, a lot of folks who have done canceled the season. Oh, you're absolutely right. I wholeheartedly agree with you. And I'm not being sarcastic either. Anybody out there who does not like to receive constructive criticism of any sort, whether it be personal or professional, is a legitimate, you're losing out, you're missing out. And it's funny you bring that up because I'm actually cultivated from a culture that revolves around feedback. In fact, even right now in my current employment, a lot of my leadership mentions that, gosh, it's crazy how you take feedback, immediately course correct, and you run with it. It's a brilliant trait that you have. So actually, I commend you for that. I agree. That's one thing we can agree on common ground. I know you're still trying to take stabs at me, but I agree. Anybody who's not receptive to constructive criticism or that negative feedback, you're not going to grow. And in fact, a lot of my viewers on here who I've run over or won over on this channel have given me that feedback, and I've adjusted, and I've earned their trust, and that's why they watch me. Because I'm not afraid to... That's TikTok again. There we go. Thank you. All right, you can go back to sleep now. I don't know why we just got an alarm on there for some reason. Since 2020, there's been so many signs that 2004 will be repeated. Why not make it on the 20-year later mark? Samuel Reed, you know, you never know. Definitely never know. Naz, how much money do I save up to? I donate to? Oh, God, no, freezing. I am not going to answer that question. Not going to answer that question. If I want all of my credibility, first of all, as a meteorologist to go down the drain, I'm not going to tell a single person how much to donate to me. If I've been thinking about maybe making a wish list for later in the hurricane season when it comes time to intercept these storms, but I'm not going to tell you how much to donate. You decide how much you want to donate, if you want to donate, and I genuinely appreciate just the lovely commentary from you guys. That is a donation enough. You're donating your time to sit here on a Friday night to listen to me talk weather and entertain people who apparently want to throw hands over this fictional hype that is somewhere out there manifesting itself. Maybe it's the Saharan dust that's bringing in these weird vibes or something like that. Because trust me, in comparison to other things I've already seen circulating around the weather sphere, this is as grounded as you can get as some of the official sources and the more reputable sources. There's other folks out there talking about multiple tropical storms. There's other folks talking about hurricanes and all this stuff. It's like, wow. Yeah, no, that's not going to happen. Chandler K., husband got a text from Squadron. What branch? Because I hear Squadron and my military ears perk up immediately. Do you think the Bermuda high will be like 2004? Yes, I do. I really do agree with that. Or not agree with that, but I should say I really do think so. Because we already have the pieces in place. If you look at the mid-range CFS, you can see it plain as day. Oh, look at that. In fact, our CFS is kind of trying to step up the activity coming out of the MDR. But if you look, the CFS has it bullseyed perfectly. Bullseyed perfectly right there. Right there. You can see general steering through the MDR. Excuse me, I don't know if the mic caught that. I accidentally snuck a burp out there. Up the mid-Atlantic coast into the Caribbean. This is your target area. Anything that forms further to the west obviously is going to have other games and other mechanisms to play around with like we're seeing right now. But anything that's long track, any Cabo Verde or MDR system, anything out there in the Atlantic, not the Caribbean. I mean, the Caribbean, yes, to an extent, but anything that's homegrown, not going to be the same mechanisms. Anything MDR and out there further out into the greater Atlantic or even the subtropics is going to have a chance to do something like this or something like this. So the pieces are already in motion. We're already kind of seeing it. If I pull up an analysis chart, it's already kind of there. Let me go over to National Hurricane Center. And I know you probably got to go outside. I'm surprised you're being as patient as you are. Let's go over to our analysis chart. Let's go to Tropical Cyclone. I need analysis. Tropical Analysis Tools. Is this going to do it for us? The ASCAT ocean wind data. Let's see. Nope, that's not going to do it. Although the ASCAT is a really good tool. Let's see. Where did I always lose track of where their analysis is? Come on, man. I've seen it on here before. Let's go to now Tropical Cyclone Products. Nope, that's exactly the same page. If we go to an analysis chart, though, and you look at the... in fact, we can just go over here and change the actual satellite AOI. Let's go back to the goes east, and let's use, we'll say, a infrared. Let's take a look at infrared. We'll go to this, band 14. Didn't want to do that. Let's go to the animation loop. My live stream is falling to the wayside. I'm just kidding, no. So if you look, the pieces are already in motion. We have a trough here, and we have a large ridge out here. And when you think about it in terms of path of least resistance, anything down here is going to move up like this, or it's going to move up like this, depending on the timing of our trough, or if there's a trough out there regardless. Here, very soon, as we go through the rest of June, we're going to have a giant ridge here and even more ridging here, which is really going to intensify our easterly trade winds, and that's why a lot of the stuff that forms down here, even just regular generalized moisture, is going to crash into Louisiana, Texas, Mexico, hug the Yucatan and Central America. So that's where we stand right now, but the pattern is definitely there for it to kind of be more or less 2004-ish. Raised, we are not using the... All right, you know what? I'm getting a little... I very distinctly said that the CFS is increasing the frequency of low pressure development down there. And for folks like TRG and for folks like One Nation, for my other folks out there who put out reliable weather information, they have tapped into the CFS on a regular basis to look at generalized schemes, supercell composite, moisture, CAPE. So obviously, there are reasons to look at it. You're looking at prevailing patterns. You're looking at pattern recognition. You're looking at general large-scale trends. I'm not here saying the CFS is forecasting a tropical storm to move through the Caribbean at X time. Only reason I'm slowly losing my patience is because it's been a long day, and I genuinely feel like the President of the United States having his tweets and his posts and his words constantly manipulated. So as you can see, this hurricane season, oh God, he said hurricane. He's predicting a hurricane for, no, I said hurricane season. Oh, but you used the word hurricane. Yeah, but, you know, damn it. I see the folks like I see Dr. Phil Klotzbach. I see Dr. Reed Timmer. I see Jeff Petrowski. I see all the big names in storm chasing like to look at the CFS to look long range at where your generalized pattern is going to be located. And in this case, what we're looking at was the high pressure. I had a question in the chat asking what the high pressure and what the steering currents look like. And all I said was, oh, look at that. The frequency of low pressure down there is going up a little bit. Anyways, folks, we are over time. I got to start ending the live chat here in a moment. We actually have a number of people watching right now. I do appreciate it. We still have some folks tuning in on TikTok as well. I do appreciate that. But yeah, it's 9:09, guys. We're a little late. I know we ran over time because I was getting a little hot in the collar, but anyways, see, there it is. Now, you know what? Just now, right here, you lost all credibility because now I know you're doing exactly what I anticipated you were attempting to do, and that's just to get under my skin. So with that last comment you just said, I know for certain you're just in here to play games and you're not going to get any more energy. So anyways, guys, do I have any other serious questions in the chat? I'm probably going to close out TikTok for my few folks watching on TikTok. If you'll excuse me, I'm going to end the live stream on there. And yeah, I do appreciate the folks on there chiming in, talking, asking a couple questions. Please feel free to drop me a message on my TikTok or on other social media platforms, or venture on over to the YouTube channel on occasion. But we'll see you guys very soon. Let me go ahead and close out my TikTok chat. There we go. Closed that out. Very good. That is good to go. Thank you, TikTok. And I'll go ahead and yeah. Yeah, you guys are absolutely right. Once I saw the fact that the H word was mentioned, it's like, okay, nope, you lost it. You lost me. At first, I thought you were actually trying to debate what I was saying and really take it to one extreme and make it sound like I'm wrong, because I'm all for a little heated debate. I will dig my heels in. You can ask my mentors back in the OWS. Whenever it came time to talk synoptic forecasts or draw an analysis charts, there were times where even like Mr. Shane Castle, who's joined us a few times, would have to pull me aside and say, Nazario, we got to just, I know you want to debate, and I know you're probably right, but let's go ahead and just give in for the sake of getting the chart issued, and we can talk about it later. So I'm all for a little bit of meteorological debate, definitely, but when he said that and literally went to just manipulate the wording, yeah, I know. Nah, see, I don't have time for that. That's not right. We have a lot of people watching tonight, and I really want to just get the good word out and try to remain as positive and informative as possible. MMA, around June 24th, is supposedly supposed to be tropical development towards Florida. From what I can see, Emma, not right now. I really don't see that. I know that there are a couple of GFS runs, our favorite model. Everybody loves to use the Goofus and mention, oh snap, Cat 2 for X. I don't really believe that's going to happen. In fact, if we want, just for the fun of it, we can look at our 18Z GFS, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Let's go to, no, this is the GEFS, excuse me. Here's the GFS. If we go to our MSLP and precip, if you look, we get right there some cyclogenesis down there in the Caribbean. Now, there's a little bit of validity, just a little bit. And the only bit of validity here that I will mention is the fact that it develops it at 144 hours. So we're not well into La La Land. If this was like 300 plus hours, I wouldn't pay it any dang mind. But the fact that we are fairly early in the model run, that gives it a little bit of merit. Am I confident that it's going to happen? Absolutely not, but it is definitely worth pointing out to give it, its little bit of credibility. Then you get this little micro-scale tropical storm that moves into the Big Bend area. And that's another thing, too, is if you look, when they're very tiny like that, most of the time it's feedback. It's noise being interpreted by the model. And in this case, because this is a hydrostatic model, as the name implies, the more thunderstorm activity you get, the more localized, just automatic low-pressure stamps you're going to get. Always. And in this case, this looks more like another phantom storm that was generated because of this huge push of energy and vorticity that comes off of South America, and then all of a sudden the GFS was kind of like, oh, hey, hurricane. The only little bit of merit, which actually does kind of raise my eyebrows a little bit. If you look, the Canadian model is spot on with that feature down there in the Southern Caribbean, and it's the Canadian model that swings another gyre low up right there and pulls it up towards New Orleans. So we'll have to see. For Florida, Emma, I'm not seeing anything to my dismay, to tell you the truth. But there is still a probability, a very low-end probability. I'd give it like a 1/3, if not a 1/4 shot at forming up. We could see 2 systems out there. Not going to go into named storm territories. God forbid. I don't want to be crucified in the comments section. I'm not saying 2 tropical storms. I'm not saying any hurricanes. I'm not saying tropical anything. I'm saying 2 different systems that we'll have to watch out there, just because the evidence is still more or less unraveling itself. We're still very far out in time. This is 200+ hours out on the Canadian model, so plenty of wiggle room, plenty of wiggle room. Time is moving fast enough. We don't have to try to expedite it any further. And with that being said, let's go ahead and get ready to close out. Thank you all very much for tuning in tonight. It's been a lovely evening together with you all. Friday night, 6/14/2024, June 14th. It is 9:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you have any additional questions, comments, or concerns, or you want to chew me out for hyping, drop me a comment in the comments section below, or privately chew me out on my other social media platforms, my Instagram, my TikTok, my X. Regardless of what you want to do, or if you want to continue the pleasantries, feel free to shoot me a line or a message on one of my other social media platforms. Happy to strike up a conversation or answer any questions that I may not have gotten to on the chat. And I always make it a point to respond to all the comments I get on these live streams and other videos that I post up here on other social media platforms for that matter as well. Big shout outs to TRG and One Nation Weather, a couple other YouTube sources coming in on the chat to tune in. And thank you very much once again for the folks who were kind enough to drop a donation on the YouTube channel. It genuinely is appreciated, and it goes right back into this channel always. It doesn't go anywhere else. It goes right back into supporting this channel and the information I put out on a day-to-day window. Any heavy rain for PR, as those waves come in, it is likely we will see some increase in your rain coverage, but truthfully, because of how fast, as Reed Timmer would say, those trade winds are ripping through there, maybe some potential garden variety thunderstorms, but not a whole lot in terms of extensive rain coverage. And by the way, I paused it right at the right time. If you look at that 18Z on June 19th, massive tropical cyclone right there by the Canadian model headed towards Mexico. So we'll see. We'll see if we get something. We'll see if we get something down there, and we will meet again very soon. It is the Father's Day weekend, so I will probably be very hit or miss on here. If, of course, there are any groundbreaking developments that need to be communicated to you guys, I will make the time amidst the shenanigans this weekend to talk weather with you all. But for all my fathers out there, enjoy the wonderful holiday weekend. For those of you celebrating with your father or a father that you may know, have fun. Try to take advantage as much as you can, because you just never know when things are going to get bad or when things are going to get rough. But that's neither here nor there. Just make sure to make the most of the holiday weekend, spend it with friends and family, and get into something fun, especially if the weather is cooperating in your local area. And we'll see you again very soon, guys. But until then, you know the drill. This is Weather Center Nazario, signing out.